And Ibn Khordazbi records in a lot of detail the construction of the wall, the materials of the wall, the gates of the wall, the designs of the wall. In fact, Ibn Khordazbi says, of course, Ibn Khordazbi is the historian who heard it from Salam. Ibn Khordazbi records that Salam says that he met people who were guarding the gate and were well aware that behind the wall were Yajuj and Majuj, and that they had seen Yajuj and Majuj. And according to Salam, Yajuj and Majuj were small creatures, 3 foot tall. And other people add here, Ibn al-Tabari, for example, mentions that Yajuj and Majuj, they procreate profusely, and that for every one amongst them, more than 1,000, children are born. And in fact, this is recorded in many books of Ibn Hajar, even narrates this in his Fath al-Bari, and others, they record this from some of the earliest authorities of our faith tradition, meaning of the first generation by name and of the second generation. They mention stories about Yajuj and Majuj that no one amongst them dies until he has left 1,000 children. For every one that dies, they leave 1,000. And other books mention, again, all of these are early books in the first 4 or 5 centuries of Islam. Other books mention that Yajuj and Majuj, they constantly, their children are constantly engaged in public zina, a'udhu billah, and so they're just procreating like beasts and creatures, and they are semi-humanoid creatures living in the furthest regions of this world, and on and on. In fact, Ibn Hisham, the author of the Seerah, in his other history book, Ibn Hisham actually, again, quite factually writes that Iskandar, Alexander, was the one who blocked Yajuj and Majuj, and he blocked them in the nether regions of the world. Al-Idrisi writes in his famous work on geography, and again quite factually, that Yajuj and Majuj live in the furthest regions of the east. Al-Idrisi, in his famous book that he wrote for King Roger of Sicily, the Norman king of Sicily, Al-Idrisi, following Ptolemy and before him Aristotle, following these ancient Greek geographers, Al-Idrisi divided the world into 7 iqlim. Iqlim is the Arabic word for climb, which is the Greek word climbs. Ptolemy divided the world into 7 zones or 7 iqlim, and each of these iqlims was further divided into 10 latitudes, if you like. And so, of course, the furthest of the iqlim is the 7th iqlim, and the furthest of the furthest is the 10th latitude within the 7th iqlim. Al-Idrisi says that Yajuj and Majuj live in the 9th latitude of the 7th iqlim, because the 10th latitude is inhospitable. There is nothing there except barren land and whatnot. And so Al-Idrisi and he said this quite factually in his book, you can still read it to this day, that he basically says that the furthest most eastern region of the world, in the 9th latitude of the 7th iqlim, this is where Yajuj and Majuj live, trapped behind the wall of Iskandar. And again, he quite factually writes that the descendants of Yajuj are 3 feet tall, and their ears hang all the way down to their necks, and their heads are completely circular. They're complete, round globes, and they can leap amazing distances, and they constantly fornicate, and each of them has 1,000 children, and he goes on and on and on. Now, the point being, it is quite clear that a lot of our early authorities, historians, and even mainstream scholars had understandings of Yajuj and Majuj that, frankly, as we are now very clearly can say, are not based upon the Quran and Sunnah. So the question arises, therefore, what are we to make of the reality of Yajuj and Majuj? And how do we understand these types of statements that are found in mainstream books? As I said, Tafsir al-Tabari has some of these types of reports. Most of the books of tafsir, most of the books of the narrations of hadith, the interpretations, the sharh of the hadith, Ibn Hajar as well and others, they have these types of reports, and sometimes they don't comment, they just leave them there. And again, a simple reality is that if every one of them had 1,000 children, obviously, very, very, very basic algebra will tell you that in 2 generations, if 1,000 have 1,000, each one of them has 1,000. In 2 generations, that's 60 years, you're going to have 1 million. And basically, in 3 generations, you're going to have 1 billion. And just in 4 generations, if we were to follow this math, which is 4 generations is 120 years, less than 120 years. In 4 generations, if this is true, you will have more members of Yajuj and Majuj than the entire cumulative number of mankind that has ever existed in all of recorded history. So again, and that's just 4 generations. If you're going to say that Yajuj and Majuj are from the time of, whenever they were, we're talking about 200 generations or so, 150 generations or so. Do the math. If every generation has 1,000, what is going to happen? Now, again, as I said, one can easily say, oh, but what these great scholars say, it's not the Quran and Sunnah. We don't have to believe them. And of course, I completely agree with this. And the response is nobody's saying to believe them. However, what is being pointed out is that there's an immense amount of folkloric tradition that even respectable authorities who otherwise are reputable in their fields, they have fallen prey to. And perhaps some of that folkloric content even affected some of our most reputable scholars in some of the most mainstream discourses of our tradition. And there's nothing, to find strange about this. In the end of the day, all of us are human beings, and all of us, we take from the knowledge that we have based upon what we have access to. And if people of a certain time and place took the knowledge of their peoples and considered it to be, the best of what they knew, that is exactly what we expect. So the point being, what exactly are we to make, therefore, of this notion of Yajuj and Majuj? And this is going to be the topic of our library chat today. And it's going to be a relatively basic one. It's not one of those really super advanced ones that I give in other places. Inshallah, if you're just interested in the topic of Yajuj and Majuj, then inshallah you will be able to benefit, even though there's going to be some academic discourse here. But overall, the specific question that I'm interested in this library chat is whether it is a part of our faith tradition, whether it is something that we must believe, that Yajuj and Majuj are literally trapped behind a wall right now. Like Salam al-Tarjuman said, that he saw the wall with his own eyes, and behind the wall were Yajuj and Majuj, and that there are billions upon billions upon billions of them. Because again, as I said, if you do the simple math from what we find of the earliest generations, that one of them gives 1,000 and whatnot, we're talking about a number that is astronomical, that is the beyond credulity, if you like. Is that something that our Sharia requires us to believe or not? This is